This weekend, Justin Trudeau held a huge press conference because he was taking so much heat over his massive failure to get the Trans Mountain Pipeline built. Everybody, including the media, was expecting him to have some sort of plan to deal with the mess that he put us in. I think reporters, Canadians alike, were just bewildered with some of the things that came out of his mouth. The Coles Note summary of what Justin Trudeau said to Canada on the weekend was as follows. I am going to spend Canadians' tax dollars, I'm going to write a blank check to a company, to kick the can down the road on this pipeline past the election without any sort of concrete plan of action on how to enforce the federal jurisdiction powers that I already have that could get this pipeline done. You know, I'm a Calgary MP. My name's Michelle Rempel. Many of you know me. This project is of the national interest. It will create jobs from coast to coast to coast. It will help us get a higher price for our energy products that we're already producing. And frankly, it brings energy products to the world that are produced under some of the most highest environmental standards in the world. You know, this isn't Venezuelan oil. Venezuela's not doing so well now. This isn't Saudi Arabian oil. This is Canadian energy products. So the fact that Justin Trudeau said this certainly got my ire up over the weekend. I was actually mic'd up at a television studio while this press conference was happening. I want you to watch my response.
Things could not be higher for the Prime Minister today. Rushing back from the conference in Peru, Justin Trudeau is now hosting an urgent meeting with the premiers of BC and Alberta to try to find a way to make sure the Trans Mountain Pipeline is going to get built. But the company, the proponent, Kinder Morgan, they own the pipeline, they've set a deadline. Get this going before May 31st or we will kill it. Now, we just heard from the Minister of Natural Resources, Jim Carr, tell us that the government is ready to do everything they can to make sure the pipeline gets built. He used the word de-risk, which might mean paying for it. Is that enough? Joining us from Calgary, Conservative MP Michelle Rempel. And in Victoria, we're joined by the NDP MP Murray Rankin. Great to have both of you here. Michelle Rempel, let me start with you. What more do you think the government can do to make sure this pipeline gets built?
They can invoke Section 9210C of the Constitution Act to ensure that any remaining issues that have provincial jurisdiction fall into federal purview. They can make sure that any court cases that Premier Horgan might put forward to try and delay the pipeline becomes directly referred to the Supreme Court. They can scrap Bill C-69, which the Pipeline Association has said if this bill goes through, there will be no more pipelines built in Canada. They can enforce the rule of law in terms of protests. I could go on and on. The thing that you just said, de-risk, this is what Jim Carr just said to you. They want to use taxpayer dollars to, I'm assuming it'll be like a guarantee or something, Evan. All they want to do is kick this down the road past the election so that their BC Liberal MPs can get reelected. And so when you think about that, when you think about the fact that they asked Canadians to pay a carbon tax to get social license to get this built, which it didn't, and now they want federal tax dollars to de-risk it for them. This isn't about de-risking it for Kinder Morgan or for energy sector workers. This is about politically de-risking it in the hopes that it will die somewhere after the election, and that is disgusting. And every Canadian, regardless of what side of the pipeline debate they're on, should be holding the government to attack. It's just feckless arrogance. It's disgusting.
Okay, strong words there. They say they're trying to de-risk it, Murray Rankin. In other words, to try to get out of this May 31st deadline in some way and support Rachel Notley's idea of investing in the pipeline. What's your view of what they're doing?
Well, first of all, May 31st is a deadline set by a Houston-based company. Since when do we allow American companies to tell us what to do in Canada? We have a federal government, we have provincial governments that do that. We wouldn't be in this mess, as you know, I think, if it weren't for the fact that Mr. Trudeau came to my riding of Victoria in the election when he was a candidate and said, you know, we're going to redo this whole process and look at how diluted bitumen performs in marine environment. get First Nations better involved, etc. They didn't do any of that. And now we're faced with two things. We're faced with massive opposition to this on our coast, and we're faced with a provincial government of Mr. Horgan that has a strong mandate from the people to oppose the risk, to deal with the risks that this pipeline is going to create.
Now this meeting, this summit, Michelle Rempel, he's got Rachel Notley in the room, and he's got Mr. Premier Horgan in the room. And he's got to come up with something. Horgan's political life depends on opposing this. He's in a coalition with the Green Party. They don't want the pipeline. They're trying to either A, delay it to death. They don't want to do it. They say they have jurisdiction over the environment. What does Justin Trudeau have to say to Premier Horgan right now?
Find his spine and be the Prime Minister of Canada. This is a project that's in the national interest, that passed one of the most rigorous environmental review processes in the world. We're not talking about Venezuela or Saudi Arabia. And you know, Murray's comment about we won't let Houston-based organizations tell us where to go, that organization is about to put $7.4 billion into the Canadian economy. And frankly, how much money have American environmental NGOs put into the opposition of this pipeline? So I find it a little rich that an NDP MP, who many organizations that are funding the anti-pipeline protest have money from outside of the country. To me, this is about a project that unites the country. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Murray. The reality is, though, is that this isn't just about British Columbia. This isn't about Alberta. This is a project that's in the national interest. It's just, to me, it's mind-boggling that Trudeau won't just come out and say there are 5 or 6 things that need to be done. Bailing out this project will not do those things. He has to get those things done first. And I just, you know,
Evan,
it's very frustrating.
I respect Michelle enormously, but we're proud Canadians on the West Coast too, and I resent this notion that Mr. Trudeau is brandishing this term, the national interest, around as if somehow we, by standing up for our oceans, standing with First Nations, standing in favor of endangered killer whales, that somehow we're less Canadian. I resent that implication tremendously.
Mr. Rankin,
people here are proud.
Mr. Rankin, just to be fair, the term national interest is a legal term of what's in the, to invoke what's in the national interest and the federal jurisdiction. But let me just try to understand that. Just a second. Let me just, and you're a lawyer, so you know this. I'm trying to appreciate the NDP's position. Your leader, Jagmeet Singh, says he doesn't support the pipeline, but then he says he wants to go to court to try to understand if the government, the federal government, has the jurisdiction to build it. My question to you, if the courts decide, if it went to court, that the government does have the jurisdiction, would he flip his support and suddenly the federal NDP would support this pipeline?
His position has been, I thought, constructive to try to suggest that we have a reference to the Supreme Court of Canada, which we can do very quickly with the support of the government of British Columbia, the government of Canada, perhaps First Nations, perhaps Alberta. We can go and get a quick ruling on whether or not British Columbia's jurisdiction over air, land, and water, which all provinces have, give it some ability to stop this project, or at least to have a change in regulations at the provincial level to address the legitimate concerns that a province like British Columbia has. Now, if the court comes up with a clear statement that no, British Columbia, you have no jurisdiction at all in the face of a federal undertaking, then of course we believe in the rule of law.
Okay, so then you would support, oh, that's interesting. So then Mr. Singh would say, yes, I support the building of this pipeline. I just want to get that clear.
He's a lawyer. He understands that the court has spoken. Now, whether or not there are other issues that need to be addressed outside of the legal process is another thing. But you're asking what that would mean in terms of the legal argument. Of course he would have to abide and accept the judgment of the Supreme Court of Canada.
Michelle Rempel.
What you have here, Evan, is you've got 2 political parties that do not want this pipeline built. So what we have seen over the last 10 years is these 2 political parties use the environmental review process to put in place uncertainty with the hope that these projects will just die or go away without them having to make the political decision or the words coming out of their mouth, we do not want this pipeline built. And that's what Murray just danced around. This is really the shamefulness of this. I would actually I would rather have the discussion where, you know, I remember sitting with an NDP candidate during the election on national TV where she just said, you know, oil should stay in the ground. I would rather have that debate than the sort of
We're not talking about that. That is not our position.
You know, no, but we are. That is where that's where the debate's at right now. So why should we raise taxpayer resources, guaranteeing things? tying up the court, de-risking for who? For politicians.
Yeah, exactly.
This just needs
exactly.
to get built.
What does that do? What does the ownership of part of this pipeline by the governments of Alberta and Canada have to do with the legal jurisdiction
Kinder Morgan
at all?
didn't ask
Nothing.
for the nationalization. Kinder Morgan did not ask for the nationalization of energy infrastructure. And frankly, the last time a socialist nationalized Canada's energy industry, it didn't go so well.
Okay, I got to leave it there. Murray Rankin and Michelle Rempel will find out more today. What does happen?